All right, everybody, let's get started. I don't want to spend too much time in here because I want to give you all time to go out in the field. What I can tell you from the lab group last time is that the groups got the lab done much faster than last week, because what we're going to do is I decided we're going to do the same route, same two benchmarks, and I think that you'll find the experience goes a lot faster. But I do want to go through a couple of things. So just to make sure we're clear, we are going to determine the difference in elevation between the concrete pad in front of Mara Library and then the northwest corner of the Memorial Fountain. We'll start off here, same place we have been. We'll assume the elevation of that to be 100 feet, just like last time, and our unknown will be that that northwest corner of the pad, the marble barrier around the Memorial Fountain. Okay. Make sure that you are rotating duties during this group, but you do not have to do that for the lab exam next week, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. A couple discussion items. So again, I'm going to go through this stuff kind of quickly, but now that you've done a differential level before, I think a lot of this stuff will hopefully be a little more second nature. So make sure that you're doing the field sketch as you're surveying, not at the end. I have in my sample notes to put the field sketch, at the bottom of that first page, but if you want to do it on the field sketch on a separate page, that's fine. I think it's a good idea to plan your route from benchmark 1 to benchmark 2 and then back before you start. And I really want to mention that because the lab exam is going to be different, a different unknown benchmark. So planning it, I think, would be a good idea. Make sure that you're setting your tripod and your auto level on like grass, on earthy areas, and try and use hard surfaces for your turning points and whatnot. It'll result in better accuracy in your survey. I think it's a good idea to develop either hand signals or some means of communicating with your partners in your group. If you don't want to give your cell phone numbers out, you can contact each of your group members through the call feature in Microsoft Teams if you have the app downloaded. It's not unheard of for survey crews to talk via walkie-talkie or even phones and whatnot. So make sure that you're doing that. When you set up your instrument, once you've taken your backside, do not adjust the level on the level between the backside and the foresight, because if you do that, you're going to have to re-measure your backside, and that's just going to add time to the lab. And then you shouldn't be moving the rod between foresight and backside readings. That turning point should stay still. Try not to have super large discrepancies between your backside and your foresight distances. That'll result in, again, a little bit better accuracy. Make sure that you're carrying your tripod and your auto level appropriately, so in the case. Now, after we mentioned this, after you take your foresight reading on benchmark 2 on the unknown, you need to move the tripod and set up again to take a backside reading on BM2. And I think it's a good idea to do your page check in the field. I won't go too much in detail on setting up the instrument, because hopefully by now you're starting to get a little comfortable with that. The one thing that I have noticed, and I just want to make sure this is clear, whenever you're setting up the instrument, the idea is that the adjustment of the tripod legs should be doing most of the work, and the leveling screws are just for fine adjustment. So if you set up the tripod and the surface of the table of the tripod is like this, and you're trying to get it level with the leveling screws, you're doing something wrong. The tripod legs are there to get it mostly level, and this is for fine adjustment. You shouldn't be doing it that much. So if you're turning the screws and it's not getting the bubble centered, take a step back and just look at your tripod. It's probably like off, and that's why your screws aren't getting the work done. Today, you are going to be reading all 3 wires, and so the readings should have a means of self-correction. So to keep the numbers simple, if your middle wire reads 6 feet and your upper wire reads 7 feet, then your lower wire should read 5 feet, right? Because it should be the same distance between them. But remember, one technique that you can use is rocking the rod. You can rock the rod back and forth, and whatever the lowest reading on the wire is, that's the one that corresponds to the true vertical distance. Whenever you're setting up, make sure you're watching out for this, that the rod isn't too high to take a reading or the rod isn't too low. And I would argue this is a little bit more important this week maybe than last week because you have to read upper, middle, and lower wire. So like if your middle wire is showing up on the bottom of the rod, that'd be fine if you were doing equal elevations, but for weighted or equal adjustment of error. But if you're doing a weighted adjustment of error and you can't read the lower wire, that's a little bit of a problem. Any questions on the lab? Because I want to talk about the lab exam next week to make sure everybody's clear on that. Everybody good? Okay, let's talk about the lab exam. So I put this up here because I want everybody to not get stressed out about the lab exam. So the laboratory as a whole, all of the labs that we do in this class accounts for 30% of your overall grade. And of that lab grade, 70% comes from the weekly exercises and 15% comes from each lab exam. So you do the math, and this lab exam only accounts for 4.5% of your grade. You know, it's really not that much. You know, I would argue it's just kind of worth a little bit more than most weekly exercises. So I don't want you to get sort of worked up on the exercise. It's really just meant to be just an independent exercise of a differential leveling loop. So let's talk about the overview. So the goal is going to be to determine the difference in elevation. We're going to use the same benchmark known elevation, that concrete pad in front of Mara Library, but the unknown is not going to be the fountain. It's going to be somewhere else. I'm not telling you where. You'll find that out next week, but it's going to be somewhere else. We're probably going to use a different number than 100 feet for the elevation of benchmark 1. I put here 200 feet, but all I'll say is just you're going to get a handout next week. Just make sure that you follow that for your unknown elevation. Your work is completed in your assigned lab group, so everybody receives the same grade, but one thing you don't have to do during the lab exam is rotate duties. So if you have somebody in your group that's demonstrated themselves to be really good at note-taking, they can be the note keeper for your lab group. If you've got somebody that's really good at running the instrument, let them run the instrument for the entire lab. I'm not going to make you rotate lab duties. You all can do that at your discretion. So far, so good? Okay, so a couple general guidelines. You are going to have to perform calculations to adjust the survey data and whatnot. And so what you're going to submit is very akin to what you've been doing in previous labs, which is the worksheet that we have and your field notes. So I mean, I am going to grade the quality of your field notes, so they do need to conform to what we typical leveling note layout and whatnot. Now, you're not allowed to communicate between groups, okay? But you obviously can't communicate within your group. That's not a problem. But one big thing, no questions from me or the TA is going to be answered during the exam. Now, you can survey it multiple times. I don't have a problem with that. If you need to retake a measurement, you can use Excel in here to check your calculations. It's open book, open notes. That's fine too, okay? Everybody with me so far? All right. One thing I'll do is I'm going to, whenever you take your last reading, your last foresight, when you get to that point, come see me or the TA because I'm gonna check and make sure that I'm just gonna write down what I'm getting for your foresight. It's just a means of helping me grade the exam. But I'm gonna make sure and take your last foresight reading so I have that independently myself. In terms of the grade, 20% of the grade is actually going to be based on your closure error, but 20% of a 15% lab exam of a 30% of the grade is very minuscule. It's less than 1% of your grade in the class. It's really not a major deal. I just want you to have a little bit of skin in the game, ensuring that your survey is done accurately. So you'll get full credit if your closure is less than or is 0.159 feet or less. And the lab that we did with yesterday's lab group, a lot of groups were just doing that by default. Like they were doing pretty good. The closures yesterday were a lot better than they were last week, so on average. You get half credit for this if it's between 0.6 and 0.16 and 0.3, and no credit if it's 0.3 or greater. 80% of your grade, though, is based on the logbook and the calculations. So your sketch, your legibility, your organization, calculations, error check adjustments, all that. If you complete the lab in a time shorter than 2 hours and 45 minutes, you won't have any penalty. Anything past that, you'll get 10% penalty for every 15 minutes past that. But I can tell you, based on the lab that we did yesterday, I don't think there's going to be a single group that really should have that much of an issue. For the most part, the groups were being able to do that no problem. And I think you'll see, as we do lab today, you'll think, would you be able to get the lab done by 4:45? And I think most of you, that won't be too much of a stressor. So what will happen is, we'll come in here, everybody will get their vests, and then right at 2 o'clock, we'll go down to the survey locker, get your equipment, and go to work. Okay? Sound good? All right, does anybody have any questions about the lab exam? So, again, it's just another leveling loop. Yes, sir?
Is it going to be a weighted distribution of the error or equal?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. But you are going to be recording horizontal distances, I will tell you that, because you're going to be determining the order and classification. So, okay. Any other questions? All right, let's get outside. Let's do some surveying. Okay, I'm going to close this. Let me shut this recording off. We'll go down, open up the survey locker, and get some work done.